Welcome, friends of Japanese prints. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dieter Ventura, and I'm the owner of the Artelino company. My little company sells Japanese prints in weekly online auctions. And I enjoy making videos about Japanese prints. And one of my favorite videos, this is meant for Japanese print beginners. I call them Japanese prints for beginners, and there I try to explain simple things. And today I want to explain two special terms that you may encounter when read a book maybe about Japanese prints, or come to a website about Japanese prints on the internet. And these two terms, which come from the Japanese language, of course, they are Atozuri and the other one Fukkoku. So what are they? Let's start with Atozuri, and let's take a look here at this image. It's a print by the artist Heisei Kawase, but it was printed after his death. Heisei Kawase died in 1957, and you see it looks very nice. It's clean. Different to old Japanese prints, which often have smudges or other condition problems. It looks perfect, and it was printed from the original blocks, but after the death of the artist. And this is what Atozuri is. It's a late printing, a posthumous printing. The expression Atozuri came to my attention, I think, for the first time in 1989. And at that time, the son of the famous publisher Watanabe he started making, to pull new copies from old blocks from famous Shin Hanga artists like Heisei. You must know, for the 19th century, and for the Shin Hanga prints of the first half of the 20th century, the blocks belong to the publisher. The blocks did not belong to the artists. So Watanabe Print Shop had dozens, maybe hundreds of blocks stored somewhere in garages or whatever. And they were still in pretty good condition. Maybe some needed some repairs. And they made new, fresh copies. And this started in 1989. And in 1989, a new Japanese calendar began. And it was the so-called Heisei calendar. And therefore, these fresh copies after Heisei's death started around 1989. 1989, yeah, correct. They are also called Heisei editions. So let's wrap it up. Atozuri are late printings, but from the original blocks. Okay, well, give me a break. And now let's talk about Fukkoku. And let me show you a Fukkoku. Well, this looks like Utamaro Kitagawa, doesn't it? One of his wonderful Beijing prints. And also this one looks perfectly clean, like just out of the, newly made out of the press. Fukkoku is a Japanese word, and it means as much as restore, return to, revert, resume. In plain words, it's a Japanese word for reproduction. So this is a reproduction. Reproduction has the advantage, no flaws, no smudges on the paper, a perfect print with fresh colors. What is a reproduction? A reproduction for Japanese woodblock prints is a print that was created from newly carved blocks, from recarved blocks, not from original blocks. That's important. Why do you recarve? Why do you make new blocks? Well, two possibilities. The old blocks were destroyed, let's say by fire, or they were too much worn out by too much use. So this is called a reproduction, although it's made by hand. Yeah. Reproductions have been a good, sometimes even a booming business since the late 19th century. Why? Towards the late 19th century, there was a growing demand for Japanese prints and also other Japanese art and artisan products, mainly from Europe. Well, Japan had been completely unknown for Europeans and for North Americans until at least 1860. It was a closed country, and it took a while. At that time they had no internet. It took maybe 2 decades until Japanese art, Japanese artisan products, Japanese culture came into the awareness of a broad public. The Japanese government also participated in these world exhibitions, and this triggered a craze for everything Japanese towards the end of the 19th century, especially in Europe and especially in France. And this craze for everything Japanese even has a special term, a word, it's called Japonism. Another reason why this reproduction business boomed towards the end of the 19th century was tourism. At the end of the 19th century, tourism had already set in for Japan. Of course, at that time, only rich and wealthy people could afford it, but basically they had the same habits and behavior. They wanted to buy some souvenirs, and Japanese merchandise at that time was cheap. So they bought reproductions because there were no longer enough originals, or they were maybe at the time already too expensive, I don't know. But reproductions by famous artists like Hokusai, Hiroshige or Utamaro, they were produced in relatively large numbers. And also at the beginning of the 20th century, and reproductions were not only made of Edo prints of the 19th century, but after World War II, also from Shin Hanga prints, artists, well, I don't want to mention any names now, but in limited numbers also from Shin Hanga prints. Well, let's come to the end. And now you may have a question. The question is, if you're interested in buying Japanese prints, well, what should I buy? Should I buy originals? They are, of course, the most expensive ones. Or should I buy late printings, Atozuri? Or should I buy reproductions, Fukkoku? I'm not going to answer this question right now because I think we should leave it for an extra video, because there are a lot of aspects that should be discussed, but it's an excellent question. It's an excellent subject for one of our next videos about Japanese prints. For today, thanks for your patience, thanks for watching, and have a good time.